Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Ithra. Today is our last panel for Tanween's 6th edition. In today's panel, we're going to discuss the relationship of urban planning, child development, and environmental stewardship. Please join me to welcome our panelists. We have Tim Gill, an independent scholar and global advocate for children's outdoor play. Tim. With us also Omar Nagati, architect and co-founder of Cluster. Welcome. And Victoria Chavez, urban technical advisor. Great. Let's start with an introduction to our audience. Tim, would you like to give a little brief about yourself and what you do?
Thank you. So I am an advocate. I fly the flag for children's everyday freedoms. What do I mean? I want you to look at this map. This map shows you what you might call the roaming range or the home territory of 4 children. Okay? And they're all 8 years old. But the big blob that you can see that takes up most of the map, that's the roaming range of the great-grandfather in this family, because they're in 4 generations of the same family, all live in the same city. And then you see how the circles shrink with each generation. You see the yellow dot at the top?
That's the sun.
That's the sun. So this is the shrinking horizons of childhood. And I think it's one of the most important changes in children's lives. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning and doing what I do. We can't turn the clock back, but what we can do is think about the value for children of having some freedom as they grow up, to explore, to be outdoors, to be active, to be connected with their community. Because normally in cities, when we think about where are the spaces that we create for children, they look like this, okay? This is garbage, right? It's the wrong, but it's also the wrong model. We need to think about streets and how streets can be more friendly and welcoming for children. We need to think about different kinds of natural space, play space, and cities around the world are doing this. And I'm studying this, researching and writing, so I'm talking about places like Barcelona with the superblock schemes, and saying this is the way cities need to go. Why? My final slide, a quote from an inspirational man, Enrique Peñalosa, the mayor of Bogota, former mayor of Bogota, talks about children being an indicator species for cities. So that's my vision, that if we create cities where children are active and visible in our human habitats, that's a sign of the health of that city, in the same way that if you see, falcons in the sky or salmon in a river, that's a sign of the health of that habitat. So all of my work is trying to achieve that vision for cities.
Thank you. Omar?
Okay, I think I was told to use the red button. This way?
Try the other? Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. Well, first I want to thank the hosts, the organizers, for inviting me to such a fabulous space, and also very inspiring to see these younger crowds, very talented, very energetic, so really a wonderful opportunity for me to be here. So I come from a slightly different perspective. I also come from a design practice called Cluster. We're based in Cairo, and Cairo is a bit different than London. So we deal with issues not only children. Children are also included as part of our interest in community participation. So Cairo, just trying to see. Okay, so Cairo is a very contested city. In other words, spaces are not super organized or regulated. So there's a lot of conflict between different stakeholders between groups. So people need different things, and the space is very limited. So that creates tension and creates sometimes a bit violent, but not too violent, but there's definitely contestation. So our work is primarily try to find design proposition to negotiate, to mediate these different stakeholders. That's in a nutshell what we do. So what I brought to you is 2 examples. So this is downtown Cairo, if some of you have been there. And downtown was planned like a European city, like Paris or Vienna, with squares and circles. But these are made for cars, for traffic. So what we try to do is to look at the back streets, at the alleyways and the in-between spaces, and to develop a framework, an idea to use these spaces for arts, for festivals, for food festival, for book fairs, anything that you cannot do in the street because of the car and the traffic and the pollution, you can do in this back street. So this is just one example of a passageway, a back street, that we design a public urban garden in which you can have arts and culture and activities. Another example is a park that we also design a very linear set of installation to combine entertainment and leisure, like a slide and a monkey bar, along with, I don't know if it's using, sorry, it's going the wrong order. Okay, so here's an image of this installation in place. So there's a library, there's a puppet theater, they unfold. So the park becomes all of a sudden a mix of leisure but also education. This is very, okay, so here's another event. And I'm just going to move forward. Puppet theater, concerts. And finally, the last, okay, so the last thing we also do is we work with art students like yourself and designers, young designers who are trained in academia, they have degrees, and they work with craftspeople, with welders or carpenters in areas that are not necessarily has a lot of formal education. But together, this is very annoying. So we do together street furniture and repaint the shops and the facade in these areas. And we do soundscape mapping. We record the sound of the city with children to see what it's like to close your eye and experience the city, the call for prayer sound, the train passing, the tuk-tuk, the honking. So how does this sound tell us about our public space? We also work with a graphic designer like yourself here to redesign the shops. And finally, I think my last slide is, if I can get it. I guess that's the last slide. All right, so I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll give it a try. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Also very grateful to be sharing this stage and to share a little bit of my work. I am an urban planner, and I'm actively working advising local governments on how to develop cities thinking more inclusively for families, particularly with young children, but also for youth. We have seen how cities have shifted and have been more aware and actively responding to the fast speed of growth and the temporality of things. So what type of solutions actually give us the chance to respond to that and to think in a bit more versatile way? I wanted to share with you some examples of not of solutions, but more of processes and the importance of that process in our journey, in our case as architects or urban designers or landscape designers, but also thinking a little bit more human-centric and thinking who's our user, who's our client, and what are we designing for them? What are we doing when we put tiny kids in front of a big street where the car has the power? And not because we don't need both. We need all these things to happen in cities, but we also need to give relevancy to one side or to the other. And well, as part of that, understand how to involve them in these decision-making processes, not necessarily thinking that they have to design the solution. There's architects for that, but they are the users. They have the feeling, they know what they need, they know what they want to do. So the involvement starts into giving them that space to be part of that discussion. In order to achieve that they can actually use the spaces, in this case, this was a very, very interesting story about a school in front of a park in the middle of a big street where the children have never used the park in front because they were scared to cross. The teachers were scared to take them. So something as simple as a zebra crossing enable children to learn more, to be more active, to be more socially aware, to be in contact with their surroundings. And the solution was pretty simple if you see it from a technical perspective. So in this ambition of let's involve them to be part of the process, to make them aware of what is around them, and also in the very young ones, maybe because we want to support their learning and their brain development, but then in the slightly older ones, because we also want them to be more active in their participations as citizens. If we want active civic participation in adults, we have to start early. We have to start with the youth that is aware of what they and how they can navigate their cities. And it doesn't happen in one plane, it happens also in other planes. So how do we make them also aware, and all of us aware of the different planes where we can play and we can enjoy maybe our cities more? And I think I had, well, and then after this, and how after small interventions, then life starts happening too. Like how we can intervene, but then also then slowly life starts taking over these spaces. How we can be more creative with solutions that are simple but actually have very, very high impact, to eventually bringing them out and making them use these spaces. So yeah, very excited to discuss further tonight.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing these wonderful experiences and ideas. I was recently visiting Melbourne, and I came across a very interesting a park, a playground for children. It's called Rocks on Wheels. And it was in the middle of a lot of high-rises in a very dense urban area. And what the city did is they got these massive boulders and placed them and used these boulders and connected them with things that almost looked dangerous for a child to play. Even the floor looked like it was made out of slate, but in fact it was rubber. So it allowed the children to not only play and not only get connected with nature, but also deal with risk. There is a general attitude, as we saw in your slide, that we are caging kids and protecting kids, but we're protecting them from danger, but also we are depriving them from encountering risk. And it's important for a child to be able to deal with risk, because that's something that later in life they have to deal with. But what was very interesting about this area is that although it looked dangerous, it was very safe and it was audited very safely, and the children were playing, and it was very inclusive because it did not deter teenagers from playing there, because it didn't look like the typical colorful child area where they would not look cool if they were playing there. So teenagers were playing, adults who were exercising would use it to do pull-ups, and also children were playing. So it was doing multiple things. It was inclusive, it was introducing children to risk while playing, and it brought everybody close to nature. So I'd like to just discuss how do we have more inclusive spaces, how do we get children to play and deal with more risk without being endangered, and so forth. So I'd like to hear from you.
Well, I too have seen the Rocks on Wheels playground in Melbourne 2 weeks ago, and it's an incredible provocation. As you say, it looks completely different from almost any other playground. It actually isn't any more dangerous, but it's risk. You can say it's risk forward. It's upfront about the fact that in a good playground, children want to test themselves. They want to feel that, the butterflies in the stomach. They want to find out what they can do. And children hunger for that, those encounters with uncertainty. Of course, they don't want to be completely in danger. So what we need is a balanced approach. We need to get away from the idea that our job as adults is to keep children completely safe. We can't do it, and if we even try, we deprive children of the very experiences that help them learn and grow, that help them how to live in a world that is not completely certain.
I mean, the child learns how to walk by falling.
Exactly.
If you deprive them from falling, they will not learn how to walk.
And the great news here is that this reframing of risk, this risk-forward approach, is spreading around the world. 3 months ago, a new international standard came out. You'll know about standards, Walid, and how much they shape design thinking. And this standard, ISO 4980, I'll say that again, ISO 4980, embeds a balanced approach to risk into recreation, sport, and children's play. So that's how far this has gone. We now have a global standards body saying the old way of eliminating risk in play and recreation isn't working.
Yes.
And so let's now see some creativity, some innovation. It's a tremendous opportunity, actually, for designers to get well away from that tired, boring, post and platform, plastic model of playgrounds. And I'm all for it.
Great. And of course, Cairo is a different story because the risks are already there in the streets. But how do we mitigate that against danger?
Yeah, so well, I'd like to make a provocation because I think we need to maybe step back and think of our cities. Pre-industrial cities, cities before cars and before vehicular traffic, didn't have the same distinction between a street for traffic and a park for leisure. In fact, old cities or traditional cities in this part of the world, the street was the playground for children. It was the marketplace. It was a place for social events like weddings, etc. And suddenly, with modern planning, we started to make sure that there's a distinction between spaces for cars, 6-lane cars, no sidewalks, and then there are another space that's called a park for children. So in a way, we created a problem, and we're trying to resolve it. So in Cairo, luckily, with the messiness that I showed you, there's still a bit of a blurred boundary. So some areas, the children still play on the street, as risky as it sounds. But I think we need also to acknowledge that cities are meant to be, by definition, diverse, not homogeneous. And the idea of diversity, tanawwu', is germane to the idea of a city, as opposed to a village where it's mutaganous or homogeneous. So conflict comes with diversity. The question is how to design a city that accommodates the multiple needs, the adults, the children, the elderly, the people on bicycles, the people who are pedestrian, and every one of these groups has their priority. A good design is a design that creates a common ground, not to prioritize only cars, another one prioritize only pedestrian, or only men, or only women. Diversity is good, mix is good, conflict is inevitable. Negotiation is the role of design, and this is, I think, what I'm calling for.
Excellent. Also, today you mentioned how, because children are one of those important stakeholders in the city, that oftentimes we don't see the world from their perspective. And you had some very interesting things to share about.
I was sharing a bit today that it changes a lot when we are kind of from our position designing for them than when we try to think about being at that height, right? Being at the height of the child and what are they actually experiencing in the city. And there is a lot of awareness tools that we were talking about, the reverse periscope, that it's a tool from GDCI, you can find it online, that allows you through 2 mirrors to actually, from the adult height, start looking at what are the obstacles that a children face in the city while you're navigating. That can be as easy to perceive as smoke or air pollution, but also can be also not, sometimes as an adult we don't perceive it, but you have a lot of visuals, that boundaries that are not necessarily very beautiful. Maybe we're seeing palm trees and a scenery that is high up, but as a child maybe you're seeing just gray, everything that is at your height. And it's actually the moment when we want their brains to start popping up, to start actually gathering more new information, more ideas, more colors, more risks even in that learning space. But maybe we have just a gray sidewalk. So I think that in that part of inclusivity, maybe we forget, and sometimes we see very, very bird eye, or we see at the height of the adult. That's what we are also kind of trained to develop around. But maybe to add as well that looking into inclusivity, most of the children are never alone, so we have to think about the caregiver as well. And the caregiver can be the parent, can be the mother, but can be the grandfather too. And when we are saying we're designing for children, we're designing for everything that enables them to actually enjoy a city that can be a playground, but can be just actually a trip to the grocery store for their grandparent to bring the food for home. So it is actually a bit more thinking about the ecosystem that surrounds them and enables their well-being, and what that it means in terms of physical interaction and play, but also what it means about comfort and trip chaining towards different activities of care and so on.
It almost seems like the circles that Tim showed us.
Yeah.
You almost want to enlarge the circle of the young one
Absolutely.
and shrink the circle of the older one, so everybody has circles that are relatively the same size, so they can achieve what you're talking about, is this inclusivity. So everybody has almost equal access, and the city addresses the needs of everyone.
And I just wanted to point out, I think we need to make a distinction between good risk and bad risk. I'm sure we all agree here on the panel and in the room, traffic is a bad risk. It's not good. And I have to say, here in Saudi Arabia, you do not have a great record for traffic deaths. It's a problem all over the world, but I think you have 850 children a year dying in the streets and in cars here in Saudi Arabia. That is a sobering thought. It's telling us that this is a system problem. This is not just about, individual errors or the fault of individual drivers. It's a design problem and it's a system problem. And to change it, we need to redesign cities. You can make cities that are good for cars, or you can make cities that are good for people and children. You cannot do both. And I just come here from 2 days in Riyadh, where we were trying to figure out how we could make the city more child-friendly. And for me, the biggest challenge is reducing the dominance of the car everywhere. And if we can do that, we can open up the city for children.
Which would bring us to creating accessibility. So if you live in your immediate surrounding, where you can reach 80% of what you need by a 15-minute walking trip, that will reduce your need to drive and to be dependent on the car. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, just on that point, I think, going back to Cairo and also many cities in this part of the world, unfortunately, we're still looking for models of good city, looking at North America, Los Angeles and, Las Vegas, like these big highways and sort of scattered development. In Cairo, for example, I can criticize my own city. The city is left to traffic engineers. So every year we're adding a new lane, a new highway, and at the expense of pedestrian experience. And I think we need to change the frame of reference. The cities are too precious to be left to traffic engineers. We need to reclaim our cities from a child's perspective, from a community perspective, from mother's perspective, and see how at least we can start from our own block. Like, how can each block become safe for children to go to the grocery store, to play on the street, to being supervised by their parents, and the cars get relegated to park around the periphery. And that's happening already in Europe and other places. But we are still, unfortunately, our policymakers are still looking up to cities are now obsolete. Even the United States they are taking down highways and building tunnels or building, public transportation. So we need to change our priorities and put our investment in our communities, not our cars. That's, I think.
I like what you are showing in downtown Cairo of creating the secondary pedestrian connections. There is, recalling in my childhood, growing up in Cairo as well, playing in the street was dangerous. They would always say, don't play in the street because they're afraid, again, of us getting hit by cars. So we ended up shifting our playing to the roof. We ended up going to play on the roof. We ended up climbing on the ladder to get to the water tank and doing our own things. And I find that one of the things in our cities that are least utilized are the roof. And imagine if we had, as you have in plan, this, how do we, if we connect all the roofs of buildings together and create a system where children could play, or pedestrians, or roof gardening, or there's a very underutilized layer of our cities, which is if we can take rooftops and make them public spaces as well. What are your thoughts?
Well, Vicky and I are laughing because Bernard Van Leer Foundation commissioned me to write a report on rooftop play. It's an internal document, but it's a very interesting proposition. I think the challenge is to create connected spaces. The word you use, connected. What often happens where we put things up on the roof, they're isolated, they're removed, they are lonely spaces. They're not the spaces where you pass by as a family or as a child, and so they don't really work. In some cities, they're doing it differently. Singapore is an example of a city where there's a kind of terracing. It's almost like a three-dimensional puzzle of connected spaces, some of which are halfway up, some are at the top. There's good connections, the spaces themselves are well designed, so that can work, I think. But I don't want to lose sight of the value of having children at the street level. If our goal is to create connection and vibrancy, children need to be where it's at, and where it's at is at street level. So I'm interested in the possibilities for roofs, but I don't want to let go of the value of and the importance of streets and street level public space for children.
Yes.
If they leave from the street, I think we lose children from the city.
But I think there is the three-dimensionality is interesting because, you know, for example, in certain areas where you might have high traffic, it could be an opportunity to transition from streets to an upper level, back down again, and create that network that you're showing, but having it more of a three-dimensional situation. Because there is a great advantages to roofs, which is, you know, access to the sun, the potential for roof gardens, which has a benefit on the building itself, reducing the heat gain on the building and so forth. But it then becomes a challenge between public and private space.
Sure. Yeah, no, maybe to add that it's definitely, it has a lot to do with how you do it. So the how, I think a lot of learnings come from that it still has to be well connected, not disproportionately high, some terracing. So there's some design guidelines on the how.
Yes. I
think what we have seen, and I think probably connected to what Tim shared, is that because this sense of independence from a child has reduced, if they are not playing at the side of the parent, what it means that they won't be playing. So what we have to aim for is how to increase that behavior, and those solution has to be closer to the parents for now, right? Hopefully it can keep expanding and we can crack that, but for now it has to be closer, and ultimately what we say is the impact of our work is increasing those positive behaviors, and what attracts more children or more parents is seeing children and seeing parents. So when they are not at that height, when I close to somewhere that I daily cross or that I can see from my window, then they sadly are not going to pursue that activity all alone. So I think it's also about that social component of bringing people in, bringing that safety, that safeguarding, those eyes in the streets, that enables as well that increase of that healthy behavior.
We are a social species, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's, as Jan Gehl, the great Danish urbanist says, people go where people are.
Yes.
And that goes for children and caregivers just as everybody else. So we need to think very hard about creating those vibrant social spaces that weave into the fabric of people's everyday lives. And that's the challenge with roofs. Can we get that to happen?
Yes.
Sometimes, but it's hard.
I may add to that. I think the roof. I think in sort of traditional cities, the courtyard played the role what the roof is. So people used to have a public space or semi-public space inside, shared by everyone. Then they have more densely populated cities. The roof becomes the building's kind of mini public space, right? So you have this, and outside the building, it's a sort of a semi-public. So you can still see your children playing outside your door. So there is distinction between the extreme public and private was blurred. There is a lot of semi-public areas that were kind of playing that role. But I want to also bring an example because we have a space in Cairo. I think I showed an image towards the end in a very densely populated area, an area that is not necessarily affluent area. And the street is not very narrow, but it's super mixed. There are workshops, there are carpenters, there are grocery store, there are tuk-tuks, but also children playing on the ground. And amazingly, everybody's kind of without romanticizing it, but this mixed use is actually working. And the example I want to bring is from actually the extreme opposite, extreme from the Netherlands, where I think, and you can tell us, Amsterdam has one of the most diverse mode of transportation. You have the cars, you have the buses, you have the bikes, you have the scooters, and every decades you have new modes of transportation. So they started to divide the street into special lane for bikes, special lane for scooters, and then cars, etc. And then the intersections became too complicated. You have like 5 traffic lights for cars, and it became almost impossible to regulate. So very recently, there was an experiment in the city center of Amsterdam where they decided to remove all the traffic lights and let people take responsibility for crossing. So rather than having if you're green, you just go and you don't look. It's very mechanical system. He said, okay, well, let's go back to, as you cross, you have to be aware of other modes. And that's what cities used to be. And that's what Cairo is. When I drive in Cairo, I have to slow down at every intersection, anticipating somebody coming, because green doesn't mean green.
Yes.
No doesn't mean no. So it's always in the shades of gray. And I think this is the essence of, if you have the community taking, not only the parent, everybody in the streets taking care of every child. So it's a community watch. Everybody's an uncle, is an aunt. So now your children are safe, because even if you're away from your parents, the next door neighbor or everybody knows that they have to take care of it. And that's it's a social dimension that we should be proud that we still have it. Whereas in other societies, it's gone. It's the child is responsibility of the state, of the police. If somebody is injured, you call the ambulance. But here, if somebody gets injured, everybody comes to help. So there is this social dimension that is not accounted for in our modern planning, and we need to reclaim it and take advantage of it as we think of our cities.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, now we're going to go for a game, the wheel of concepts. Okay? We're going to spin the wheel, and it's going to complete the sentence and complete the question that you need to answer.
Ladies and gentlemen, for this question is, how can fill in the blanks contribute to building sustainable and inclusive cities for the future?
We'll start with you, Tim. Okay. Did I spin it too hard? Right on the line. Waste reduction, no, not yet. Urban farming and food security.
Well, I'm so excited. I feel like I'm on a TV game show.
You are.
I want some prizes. Okay, I think one of the I talked earlier about reconnection, and I think one of the things that we need to do is reconnect ourselves and our children with food and with the origins of food. Where does food come from? How do we get it? How does it end up on our plate? Because many children today don't understand that.
Yes.
So I think I've seen some great urban growing projects is what I want to talk about. So bringing plants and animals into the city and introducing and helping children understand where food comes from.
And I think this is where the roof comes in, because the roof could be an opportunity to be a roof
roofs,
farm.
Community gardens, city farms. In my country, in England, the city farm is it's literally bringing a kind of farming model into the city and showing children who may have never seen a cow, may see a live chicken, what that means, and getting a better sense of of what stewardship looks like. Now, that's not going to solve global food problems, but it is going to help the next generation understand more about, the food process and how close we need to be to the way food gets produced. So that's my take on that question.
I think it brings us back to Cairo, where also, because a lot of the migrants who come to the city come from agrarian communities, and they bring with them things like the pigeon towers that you had in the farms. They build these beautiful wooden structures, and they grow the pigeons. So there's a bit of the agrarian culture that comes naturally into the city.
By the way, I've also seen some very lovely projects, public space projects, where you have food growing and children's play in the same space.
Yes.
They actually complement each other very nicely. You have that kind of adult presence, and so the children have someone keeping an eye on them.
Yes.
And the children feel that sense of being in a space that's shared with adults, and also a chance to find out more about food.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question, Omar.
Same question?
No, I think it's another question or same question? Safe. Same question, but different word.
I thought we had to win it ourselves, but...
Come do it.
No, we trust you.
There we go. How can community engagement and participation contribute to building sustainable and inclusive cities for the future?
I think I've already answered this question, no? I think I've been talking
You want
about
another
that.
one?
No, that's fine. But I think, just to link back to Tim's question, I think, we often, get a project, funded by UN Habitat or something. It's about climate change, and let's try green roof and roof farming in the poor neighborhood, and then we go to the neighborhood and it's already roof farming. People have been doing that for decades and for centuries. As you said, they have poultry, they're growing small vegetables, and they have pigeon tower. So I think one of the things that I'm really kind of amazed by when I was walking the exhibition before the session, this small competition and inspiration from traditional crafts, calligraphy and this, and producing products and bags and stationery, and I think we need also to look back to our cities and see how our city used to work, and then try to get inspiration and change our frame of reference and find solutions that may be more appropriate to our climate, not narrow streets, shadow street, like more roof farming, etc. So I think a community engagement means that you open up your stakeholder, your clients. You're not only the person who's paying you to do the job as an architect, is your client. Your client is the community. So you need to talk to the different stakeholders and then ask each representative what would they like to see and what their concerns are. And out of this matrix of priorities and interests and conflict, you create a design brief so that you make sure that your design at the end will cater to a much broader set of groups, not only the person who paid you to do the job.
Absolutely.
That's, to me, the community engagement.
Excellent. Ready?
No.
Again, the same one. I'll rotate it again. Otherwise, you'll say it was rigged.
Maybe I want to answer no.
And it's rigged.
I think so.
Just choose one.
Would you like me to
So
go
we go
for...
to let's go to choose one.
I will go for the sustainable urban design. I think
This
there's
one.
a lot of people aligned
Okay.
to design here. And, well, it's kind of doubling the question. So type sustainable urban design to sustainable building. I think it actually connects a lot to those principles. No worries. To the principles that have been discussed, how urban designers can look more deeply into the community. When I feel there's a trade between the designer being an artist and actually being an artisan and understanding the culture and the context so deeply to be able to respond to those needs then in an artistic way. So I feel that the core of sustainability, as we have learned probably the hard way through a pandemic, is what belongs to us, the solutions that our community has created within themselves to be resilient and to respond and to survive, that we can reinforce, that we can learn from, and then add additional layers of complexity. So I think that awareness of being an instrument, of being a facilitator of a process and position the designer in that space, for me is key to then finding solutions and co-create instead of being an actor that is outside that process. And I think, and I hope that's where the design field is also going to and evolving towards, not just being an observer that is valid on itself about seeing behaviors and understanding what people is doing, but then also listening and being immersive in what people is actually living and responding to. So I do think that there's a positioning on where the designer stands that is going to make the response sustainable or not.
Great. Well, before we close our talk and session today, if you have any final comments you'd like to make or thoughts to share.
I just want to take on the conversation about sustainable design. If we ask ourselves, what does a sustainable neighborhood look like? A sustainable urban neighborhood? Well, it's compact, it's easy to get around on foot or by bike, and it's green, okay? It looks a lot like a child-friendly neighborhood, okay? So really the two things are completely interlinked. So if we want to build the case for sustainable neighborhoods, let's talk more about children. Let's see children as a kind of lens or a mirror for building a long-term collective consensus about the way cities need to change. And there are mayors in cities right now who are doing that. The mayor of Paris, the mayor of Tirana, the capital city of Albania, a Muslim city. They are talking about children as a symbol of their city's future and helping to make visible and kind of make concrete what sustainability means, because it's kind of an abstract term. And I think it shows the power of elevating the status of children in the conversation. And I think we can learn from that.
Absolutely.
Final comments?
Yes.
Well, I think, as I said, there are two ways of looking at our cities. So there's planners and policymakers who are making decisions about how should how our cities should look like, and that's in terms of plans and road, network, and zoning. And there is a bottom-up process where every one of us takes responsibility of their environment. It could be your house, it could be your street, it could be your neighborhood. And I think we need both ways. We need the regulatory mechanism, the macro level, because some decision has to be looked at on a bigger scale. The whole event, I think, is about scale. So environment and climate cannot be looked at on a micro scale. We have to look at the effect on climate on a city. Probably traffic the same way, right? But there's some issues could be actually addressed on a very local scale. So my take on this, that we should take responsibility and reclaim our rights to make decisions in our own neighborhoods. So you can start by your street or by a little pocket that's leftover space that's unused, and you can make an idea. You can work with your colleagues, with your neighbors, with your friends, and make a proposition and try to turn it into something that's more livable or more safe or more green. And then try this idea and then take it to the council or the policymaker, but act on your belief. And I think this is very important. And I always think that cities are way more important to be left to planners. I'm a planner myself. I think we need to open up the decision and the making of our cities to wider citizens more than just the technocrats. That's my...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Victoria?
Yes, maybe to say that to start looking a lot into the whys. And it's not just because we want to see children playing and it gives a nice feeling and we imagine this happiness, but also because this is the way they learn. This is the way they learn not just cognitive skills, but this is the way that they learn to interact with people, how to build social relationships, how to react with empathy or not. So I think it also, thinking it as the building blocks of society is way more relevant in understanding the role that the city and the physical environment is playing in constructing all that imaginary. So also going to that responsibility is not just the responsibility of maybe a beautiful playground, but it's the responsibility of how citizens are interacting daily and responding daily to each other. So I think it puts us in a very privileged position of changing how we are being empathic to each other in cities, and hopefully that's something that we from our seat as designers can do and can reinforce.
Thank you very much for a very rich conversation. And ladies and gentlemen, please, thank you for our panelists. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Great. And now it's time that we will immerse ourselves in 15 minutes of pure inspiration and knowledge. Our next speaker is Rania Elkalla, founder and CEO of Shell Homage. Please welcome Rania.
Can I have a pointer? Can I have the pointer?
بعد كده هنقول ايه؟
Clicker, yes. Okay, before I talk. Okay, can we make it with sound? Can we make the video with sound?
أنا كنت مستوحاة من بابايا، دايما بيجيب قشر اللي بيجيب المكسرات بقشرها وبنكسرها على طول قبل الأكل عشان تبقى طعمها أحلى ومور فريش وكده. فاحنا دايما بنحاول نجيب الحاجات أورجانيك ما تبقاش معلبة في كده فيبقى أكل صحي. فكنت بشوفه بيكسرها وقد إيه صعبة تكسير المكسرات دي بالنسبة لي. إن معظم النت 67% من الدهول فروت هي القشرة. وقوية جدا يعني astonished، هي عاملة زي الخشب، يعني ليه محدش بيعمل بيها حاجة وإتس ويست. أقدر أكان كاستمايز لو أنا عايزاها حاجة ناشفة أو عايزاها حاجة شوية طرية أو حاجة حسب اللون اللي أنا عايزاها، أو تكون حاجة مثلا شفافة خالص.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me. And through this 15 minutes presentation, I would like to take you through my journey and through my design practice. So I'm Rania Elkalla. I'm the founder of Shal Homage. I'm a multidisciplinary designer. I studied different design disciplines, and always through my work, I try to merge and combine those design disciplines together. I studied product design, graphic design, material science, and biomaterial engineering. And I try always through my work to solve problems. Being a designer for me is always essential to challenge myself on a daily basis and to solve problems and try to find always solutions for the users and how we can comfort the people and the users. So shell basically stands for the different shells that I use. So I mainly use egg and different nut shells and focusing on food waste. And homage means honor and respect to their journey. So I always try to embrace those shells and present them in a completely different way. So basically, why did I start this? There were several reasons why I wanted to start Shal Homage. First of all, there are 30% of food is always lost or wasted. And food industry is one of the biggest industries in the world, so it's a huge amount of waste generated on a daily basis, and how we can basically benefit from this type of waste. And for me, it's not waste. For me, it's a raw material, and we need to change the perception of how we perceive it. How can we make something resourceful and also functional out of it? Another reason is because we as designers, whenever we have any design project or phase, we always come up with the choice of the material in the end of the design phase. And for me, we always challenge ourselves, like, why this material cannot work? Maybe we need another material for this solution or to have a better impact on the design. And that's why I always wanted to understand further how can I use better materials, or how we can have something which have a good environmental impact. Another reason is because I wanted to bridge the gap between product designers and material engineers, because material engineers always come up with design, with materials that we don't know anything about, and they don't really maybe focus on the aesthetics or the haptics of the material. So I wanted basically to follow the steps of material scientists, but also focus on the haptics and the surface design and the aesthetics of the material. So there are 1.59 trillion eggs produced worldwide. So it's a huge amount. Can you imagine how big is this number? So that's why I wanted to focus on utilizing a food waste which is has nothing to do with a certain region or a country, that you can find it basically everywhere. Also, there's around 5.13 million metric ton of tree nuts worldwide. So for me, I always visualize nutshells as resemblance for wood, and eggshells is always, for me, a resemblance for ceramic. So as a designer, I always try to visualize things in a technical way and also in an aesthetical way. So I started analyzing those shells, that for me, they are 95% calcium carbonate. It contains minerals, collagen, and it also captures up to 78% of carbon dioxide in the air. So we usually always underestimate those eggs. And basically, from an aesthetical point of view, they are having various of white and brown tones and beige tones that we wanted to emphasize and also embrace it through this wonderful material. So I started analyzing basically those shells in a different way, and this is how Shal Homage was born. So basically, Shal Homage is a biodegradable composite material based on plant-based binding material, and the outcome can vary based on the application. It's an award-winning material, and it can be applied in several industries as interior design, product design, consumable goods, 3D printing, jewelry design, and also in fashion. And basically, the material application can vary and can be customized according to how it can be used. So for example, it can be injected, molded, it can be extruded, it can be pressed. So whatever any industry, it can be utilized. So let me take you through my process. So basically, I collect the shells from different factories who sell on daily basis egg yolk to big industries. And then I also try to support local farms to help in the process of separating our trash. And then I collect those shells, I take them to the lab. It has to be very cleaned and washed really well and sterilized, and then put into the oven to kill any bacteria or any smell. And then I start to grind them into different particle size, and then based on what I'm going to do, then it can be pressed and then applied into products. And here you can see the process of how I do it in the lab and the raw material, how it's processed. So also for me, it was very important to create a material that can be easy to use and understandable towards different manufacturers. So it's not only just for myself. So if I want to laser cut it, CNC it, so, or whatever kind of tool, it can be easily used. And then here comes my role as a designer, because I always try to find applications, not just doing a material or a concept. How can I make this commercialized and available to everyone? So I was always trying to challenge to find applications. And here, let me take you through the applications. So as products, we have daily products like at home that we utilize, but we interact with them, and we try to build a relationship with the objects that we use. So I wanted to give an indirect message to users about things which we consider waste regarding those different objects that we use. Because I always try to emphasize the word fun that exists in function. And my work is always eclectic and derived from different cultures and styles. So one of the projects that I collaborated with recently, it was with Samsung. It was their first time to collaborate with designers and artists in the Middle East. So I designed the cover of the phones using different colors, also inspired from United Emirates nature. So I wanted to have basically a feeling of nature combined with our phones. Like usually the moment we open our eyes, we touch our phones until end of the day, until we sleep. So having something which is technological and also like very fast-paced, how can we combine nature with it? It's something which is the completely opposite, to have it in the palm of our hands. And here you can see the covers. From the other objects that I also did was combining like different daily objects. So for example, I always use different industrial waste from factories. So I collect like leftovers of wood or metal or from construction waste and then combine it with my objects. And here you can see the different applications, that how it can withstand different impact, and it's very strong. So these are different applications of products that we use, and I try always to present like the waste completely away from its origin. So it doesn't have to look cheap, or it doesn't have to look like something which is gonna break in a few minutes or a few seconds. It has to be something durable, and then if I don't need this object or product anymore, I can easily dip it into my garden and it will start to decay in peace. And also be a good fertilizer for the soil. Another also important factor in my work that I love collaboration. So I always collaborate with different designers worldwide and try to present the material in different forms and functional designs. Other application for the material is 3D printing. So it can be as a filament, which can have a very stony texture, and then can be used in rapid prototyping and model making. Other application is interior design. So here you can see the material is customized, the colors according to the branding of the space, and how we can have sustainable also interiors around us. This also is another massive gate as an outdoor gate for a shop, and it's also using the material because it's very lightweight and it's also a better usage than marble. Also, the material can be translucent and allowing light. Maybe you have seen this lighting unit in the back of this stage. It's presented here by Isola. And basically, I try also to change the material that can be used in lighting. It can be bended, it can be used in various forms. Also in consumable goods. So we try to replace the single-use plastic, and it can be also used in hair combs and different applications. And basically, I always try even to have the tags as this can be made by your breakfast leftovers or your birthday cake leftovers. Also jewelry, as the jewelry I'm wearing. So it can be utilized in jewelry design because it's very lightweight, and most of the jewelry that we buy, we are not sure how the stones are mined. Is it ethically produced or not? So that's why we always have question marks, and we're not sure. So how can I change something which we always see as in trash and bring it into jewelry, the contrary and the opposite of how jewelry should be? Also in fashion, so if you want to use it as in the weaving or in beads or to have in buttons, to have a completely sustainable garment, and so it's a sustainable garment, and then you can let it decay when you are sure that it will decompose. And then I always try to have a playful element in the materials. So I always try to associate the material towards towards food. So sometimes the textures and the surfaces are inspired from like banana milkshakes or things that we eat, and to have this humor in the surfaces. It can also look like a chocolate bar, and also it can be extruded like a spaghetti. So for me, the most important part is like the story behind the object. It's not about the object or the thing that you use, it's what's behind it. How can we get educated and inspired from the products that we use and interact on a daily basis? And these are like the various awards which Shal Homage won, and different publications. And also had the pleasure to be exhibited in all major design weeks all over Europe. So I would like to end my talk with genius is 1% talent and 99% hard work. So it's all about hard work and dedication. And basically, it's something that anyone can do with persistence and with a belief in their mind. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Rania, for this very inspiring talk. And we'd like to just come to the end of Tanween panels and talks for this year. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope to see you next year. Thank you very much.